Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It is time for us to get our program underway. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Brother Kelvin X. Lovejoy. I am with BHCA, Blue Hills Civic Association, but doing the work as Building Hartford through community action. We want to thank you all for being here this evening, and we don't want to delay our program, so we want to get right on and start with our welcome. You know, whenever you are in someone's house, you want to give them the utmost respect and honor. And being an alumni of Weaver High School, I was here in the year 1985. Wow. It was a while ago, Brother Epps. But please help me, family, to bring on the executive principal of the Weaver campus, Mrs. Glennis Richardson.
So on behalf of the Hartford Public Schools District Board of Education, our wonderful superintendent, our just strong and passionate community partners, Blue Hills Civic Association, and the entire Weaver campus family, we welcome you to our wonderful campus, and you are the first audience in the Black Box Theater. So give yourselves a round of applause. My grandparents were illiterate, and coming from a small southern town, I began to spend a lot of time with my grandparents at one particular time in my life. And being illiterate, when they expressed their love and affection and passion for people, they would do so through cooking, because we came through the South. And so as a child, I began to associate how my grandmother felt about company based upon what she cooked and how she cooked. So if she really liked you, she would have a full spread, take days to prepare. And if she really didn't like you, she would just throw a little something together because, as she would say, it was the Christian thing to do. But what that taught me was it taught me the relationship between how we feel about people and what we serve them. And so as Dr. Akua shares with us today about parent power, let's keep the power in mind that we have as parents to shape our children's today and their tomorrow. On behalf of our campus, thank you so much for coming, and I know that you're going to have a wonderful time. Thank you.
Now, I know we got a stronger hand than that. Let's give it up for our principal, Mrs. Richardson. And Mr. Richardson.
Yes.
Let's give a double hand for Mr. Richardson. That's right. All right. How y'all feeling out there? Wonderful. So we're going to move very quickly, and I will be your host, as it says here on my paper, your master of ceremonies. So anything that goes wrong, don't blame me. All right. But, you know, when we talk about education in our community and the hardworking people that are behind the scenes, making sure that our schools are functioning and that our teachers have the resources that they need and that children are in a safe, decent place to learn how to become productive citizens within Hartford, Connecticut. There are people behind the scenes that are working extremely hard, and they have a boss. And so I need your help to bring on the leadership of Hartford Public Schools, our school superintendent, Dr. Leslie Torres Rodriguez. Please help me.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I just have to do this as a former principal that once opened a brand new school. I you have to smell, right? Because that's when you know that it's fully actualized. Welcome, everyone, to the beautiful Weaver campus. Ms. Vicki, I must say thank you, because when you called and you shared your vision with me, I thought, this is in full alignment with what we believe in. And so I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to call to mind that I'm, as a superintendent, I too have people that stand shoulder to shoulder with me, starting with our board. You know, I see Miss Shante Brody here, but we have an entire board that has these values that I believe we all share. And one is around making sure that we value who it is that we serve. And in order to do that, we have to do that in partnership. And you've heard me say before that I believe that each and every one of our students, they're beautiful and they're capable. And they come to us with a set of dreams and aspirations that it is our job then to help fulfill by providing the supports that they need. And with that comes the priority that we have around family and community partnerships. And that's not just having these opportunities to learn from one another. That matters. But what also matters is that we engage in the partnership as learners, that we take a learner stance to learn from one another, that we don't assume at the school district that we are the experts at everything, that we also believe that our partners are experts in their children and their family dynamic, and we want to learn from that as well so that we can meet the needs of the whole student. When I think about Dr. Akua, his work, his literature, what he stands for and what he tries to cultivate in other people, I think about the fact that we value the true brilliance, the inherent brilliance that our students bring forth every single day, and that oftentimes is overlooked. And so tonight, I hope that we all are open to take a learner stance that is culturally relevant and responsive to who our students are and where they come from. So on behalf of Hartford Public Schools, my team, and our Board of Education, I welcome you to this wonderful event. Thank you.
Let's give it up once again for our superintendent, Dr. Leslie Torres Rodriguez. Yes, indeed. Now, you know, from the community standpoint, Blue Hills Civic Association, BHCA, has been doing some very diligent work when it comes to making sure that the children of Hartford have a quality education. And that means as a community-based organization that we are deeply involved, that we are pulling in parents, that we are pulling in residents, businesses. We're pulling in the village to help our district provide the best quality education that can happen. And so, you know, I feel very honored to be a part of the BHCA team. And I can remember when, you know, committees started coming together to work with the Office of the Superintendent and many of the hard-working departments to pull Weaver back together. And under the leadership of Mr. Lee Hunt, we did some great work. And Mr. Hunt just recently retired. And if you don't mind, please give me a hand for our former executive director, Mr. Lee Hunt, Coach Hunt, as we lovingly call him. And so he retired this past summer, 2019, to go and play golf. I'm sure he is not playing golf. But he turned the reins over to some very capable hands. And I would like for you to help me bring on not only capable in mind, but capable in heart, our beloved executive director, Mrs. Vicki Gallen-Clark. Please help me.
If you take a look at your program, look at the front and look at the back, this event would not be possible unless we had the financial support of all of these individuals. So first of all, let's give them a round of applause.
Hi,
My name's JC McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
And I see so many partners out there, so many friends, so many collaborators. I'm not going to even start calling names because I'm going to miss someone. So thank you so much for being here. If we have any parents in the room, would you please stand? Parents, grandparents, guardians, aunts, uncles, please stand. Yes. Now keep standing. If we have any educators in the room who didn't fall into those categories, would you please stand? If we have anyone who is an adult who didn't fall in any of those categories, would you please stand? Okay. Now, this is what I want you to do. I want you to turn to someone, like you're in church, turn to someone and look at them and take the NIMBY pledge. What is the NIMBY pledge? Not in my backyard. So just turn to one to somebody and say, not in my backyard. Not in my backyard. Okay. Now just stand up for 30 more seconds. So the rest of you must be students. So what we're saying to you students, that as caring adults, you will succeed, you will graduate on time, you will have some kind of post-secondary experience, you will not die on my watch, you will not fail on my watch, you will succeed, because it's not going to happen in my backyard, okay? And so we're making that pledge to you today. And so that's why we're so excited to be working with the Hartford Public Schools. We're so excited to be working with Ms. Richardson, her entire team. We're an extension of the Weaver family. Yes. We always say that. Yes. And so that's our commitment to you, our pledge to you. And that's why I'm so excited that this is the first of a series of, I'm borrowing the word from you, then you borrowed it from somebody else, communiversity. That's right. Where we learn together as a community. We hone in together as a community. We pledge to each other. When we get tired, we come back together and hold each other up and get back on the battlefield because lives are at stake. And so we're all working together. Can you imagine the history that can be made here in Hartford where we change the narrative? Not in my backyard. Thank you so much for being here. You can have a seat. I'm going to bring up the Master of Ceremonies, Mr. Lovejoy, again, because even though as the executive director, I get credit. I really can't take the credit. It really comes from the great team at BHCA. Everybody in the blue, you see whether they're students or they have the vest. We have the best team ever, I'm telling you. Yes, give it up for them, the best team ever. And so this was really, for Dr. Akua to be here, was really the brainchild of Brother Kelvin Lovejoy. And the team rallied around that. So give it up for Brother Lovejoy. He's going to introduce Dr. Akua. Come on up, Mr. Lovejoy.
Once again, for Ms. Clark, let's give it up, please. All right. So we are getting to that point in time. The reason why you're here, to hear from our beloved brother, Dr. Chike Akua. If you look in your program, you will see a brief bio of Dr. Akua. And I'll read some of it. Dr. Akua is a professor of educational leadership at Clark Atlanta University and a leading authority on increasing the achievement of today's students, especially those in some of the most challenging schools and communities like Hartford. I'm sorry, y'all didn't see that on there. That's what it says. It goes on to say Dr. Akua has over 25 years of combined experience in education as a public school teacher. If I'm not mistaken, was Teacher of the Year. All right. What year was that, sir? Last millennium. All right. Curriculum developer, professional development provider, leadership consultant, policy analyst, and university professor. In 1995, he was selected Teacher of the Year. There it is. Newport News Public Schools in Virginia, and was also selected as one of Ebony's 50 Leaders of Tomorrow. A year later, in 1996, DeKalb County Board of Education, Atlanta, Georgia, recognized him with the Excellence in Education Award for service to youth. Now, I'll tell you that it was probably about 6 years, maybe 7 years now, that I was on a conference call, and I heard about a conference that was going on in Atlanta, Georgia, the Success Quest Boot Camp. And I heard another voice on there. A brother said he was from Hartford, Connecticut as well. And this were people from all around America that were on that conference call. And it was my brother, Brother Leonard Epps. Good brother. And I hung that phone up and I called. I said, "Were you just on a phone call?" He said, "Yeah, I'm going down to Atlanta." "What, you going?" I said, "Yes, sir, I'm going." He said, "Great, we could be roommates." I said, "All right." And we went down there and we learned so much. We had a good time and we started to build that connection, that friendship, that brotherhood with Dr. Chike Akua. Now, I know Brother Epps, he has his own stories of what he brought back. But I will tell you, one of the things that I brought back to Hartford, Connecticut was the student creed. And I'd like to bring Dr. Akua on with the student creed. And I'm going to ask for your help. Is that all right?
Yes.
So I got to come out here because when we do the student creed, we use an old African tradition called call and response. I got to use the microphone because we're being recorded. But that means that I'll do the call and you do the response. Is that all right?
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's give this a try. So it goes like this. It says, "I am a student."
I am a student.
Now, of course, because we're in a school, you all understand grades. Is that right?
Yes.
So if I give you a B- on that, you're not going to be upset.
No.
What you're going to do is increase. Is that right? Let's try it again. I am a student.
I am a student.
That's what I'm talking about. Seeking to be a scholar.
Seeking to be a scholar.
The standard is excellence.
The standard is excellence.
Today and tomorrow.
Today and tomorrow.
I'm disciplined, focused, and on time.
I'm disciplined, focused, and on time.
I'm organized, respectful, and responsible.
I'm organized, respectful, and responsible.
I'm on a mission
I'm on a mission
to elevate myself,
to elevate myself,
my family, my community, and humanity.
and humanity.
Ashe,
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 Ashe.
Ashe.
And Ashe is a West African word, which means let it be so. Give yourself a round of applause as we bring on Dr. Chike Akua. Let's keep it going, family.
It's 11:59 on the clock of destiny. And life is like a minute. Only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon you, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it. But it's up to you to use it. You'll suffer if you lose it. Give account if you abuse it. It's only a minute, but eternity is in it. And with that minute, you, me, and we can change and transform the world. Now, if you really believe that we in this place can change and transform the world, would everyone please say Ashe? Ashe. Got to be strong in that. Ashe? Ashe. Thank you. See, as Brother Lovejoy said, Ashe means I agree. It means, this West African word means let it be so. But it also represents the activating energy and the presence of the Spirit that is both within us and around us at all times. And so I'm going to use that word Ashe as a call and response this evening. Because when I say something that I want you to remember, I'm going to use that word Ashe and have you to repeat it after me. When I say something I definitely don't want you to forget, I'm going to use that word Ashe and have you to repeat it after me. But you don't have to wait until I say it. If I say something that taps your spirit or touches your soul, if I say something that leads to an instant awakening, if I say something or share some information that gives you deep insight into your circumstances, then you can say Ashe, and that lets me know we're all on the same page. Ashe? Ashe. All right, wonderful. Let me tell you what an honor, privilege, and a blessing it is to be here with you. I think the last time I was here was probably back around 2013, and I see so many familiar faces like that of Dr. Terrell Hill over here and Brother Leonard Epps and many others who were instrumental in bringing me here before. I want to also give a very special thanks to Ms. Richardson, our executive principal here. Let's give her a round of applause and all those that are involved in this. To Superintendent Dr. Leslie Torres Rodriguez, let's give her a round of applause. To the BHCA family and Vicki Gallen Clark, let's give her a round of applause. And I certainly wouldn't be standing here today if it was not for Brother Kelvin X. Lovejoy, who, wait a minute, everybody say 7 years. 7 years. For 7 years he's been working on getting me here, and we made it happen, and it's about to go down. It's fitting to go down, brother. It's about to get deep in a minute. Yes, give him a round of applause because the commitment that he has expressed in making this happen is nothing short of amazing. I want to bring you greetings from Clark Atlanta University, where I serve on the faculty in the Department of Educational Leadership. For those of you who may or may not know, Clark Atlanta University is one of our wonderful HBCUs. HBCU means Historically Black College or University, and these institutions have a history and a legacy of producing excellence without excuses. Ashe? And so I'm very proud to serve on the faculty there. It also happens to be where I did my master's degree as well. Let me also bring you greetings from the Teacher Transformation Institute, where we use standards-based, research-driven, and culturally relevant instructional strategies to increase student achievement. Now, those are just some big-sounding words to say that our children are brilliant. Ashe? But many of them are in schools and school systems where they're seen as a problem rather than as people. And so we go into schools and school systems, colleges and universities and educational conferences, and we work with teachers and leaders on how to bring out the brilliance in our children. And we also work directly with the students themselves. We had a wonderful roundtable this afternoon with some students right here at Weaver High School. Now, I don't know if I don't want to turn the lights all the way off, but I wonder if we can bring them down a little bit so that my pictures can be seen a little bit better, because the images that I have to share with you this evening are going to be very important. The work that we do through the Teacher Transformation Institute, right there. A little higher if you can get it. We don't want them all the way out. Well, I guess we'll have to take it down. Okay. But y'all work with me as we go through this, all right? So you can go ahead and bring them back down. A little more if you can.
Little more
Down a little more. That's a little. You might have to bring it all the way down because we can't. There you go, right there. All right, let's just leave it there. That's fine. That's fine. We'll work with it from there, okay? And so the work that we do around the country is working with diverse groups of teachers and leaders and parents to help them to learn how to bring out the brilliance in our children. As I said, regrettably, many of our children are in schools and school systems where they're seen as a problem rather than as people. But I need for you to understand that there is a solution to the problems that we face in many of the urban school districts around the country. And there are many common problems that are faced, okay? And so as we get into it, hopefully we will address some of those problems this evening. And since I can't see you right now, I'm going to need for y'all to say Ashe from time to time. Ashe? All right, so if you're with me, you can, and if you're not comfortable with what I say, you say amen, you can say go ahead, you can say teach, you can say preach, but I need for y'all to talk back to me this evening, all right? Because I need for you to know that I need to know that you're with me. So it is customary oftentimes when we gather together, we begin by giving honor to our ancestors, because there's an African proverb which says, if we stand tall, it is because we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. Or as Dr. Jacob Carruthers has said, indeed our stride is wide because we're walking in the footsteps of giants. Ashe? All right, now if you have a phone this evening, would you take your phone out and would you hold it up? Just take a moment, take your phone out and hold it up. Wonderful. I see a few of them. Keep holding it up. Wave it in the air. Wave it like you just don't get. No, I'm just kidding. I just want to make sure. Okay, so what I need this evening is I need some social media volunteers, because what's about to happen in here is so powerful that it cannot be kept just to a local event. So we're going to make this local event a global event. One more time, we're going to make this local event what? A global event. So if you see some pictures and some images, then I want you to make sure you take a picture of what you see and post it to social media so that other people can benefit from this experience as well. Ashe? Ashe. As you can see, I have a very visually driven presentation. You've heard it said before that a picture is worth what, everybody? 1,000 words. But I also want to introduce you to the fact that what's necessary is far beyond what you can see with your physical eyes. And you must look with what ancient Africans called the ujat. Everybody say ujat. The ujat is the third eye, the eye of all seeing enlightenment, that allows us to see far beyond the physical realm and into the mental and spiritual dimensions. Even as the great poet Listerveld Middleton said, sharpen your eye and tune your ear so you know what you see and understand what you hear. If y'all are ready to get started, everybody say, let's get it. Let's get it. All right. So whether you're aware of it or not, I have a book called Parent Power. And what I want to do is I want to go through, and we won't have time to obviously go through all of the content of it, but I do want to let you know the subject matter that we talk about. And so I want to go through each chapter real quick so that you can see the topic of each chapter. I'm going to say the number, and I would like for you to call out the title of that chapter. Everybody ready? Okay, number 1. Identity. Number 2. History. 3. Memory. 4. Spirituality. 5. Community. 6. Activity. 7. Responsibility. 8. Imagery. 9. Sexuality. 10. Security. 11. Possibility. And 12. Legacy. These are the 12 areas of the parent power method that I believe every parent and anybody who works with children should have a perspective on each of those 12 items. I may cover maybe 3 of them this evening. Ashe? Ashe. All right, and I always like to begin with what I call my initial premise. My initial premise. And my initial premise is that our children are chosen. Ashe? Everybody say our children are chosen. I believe our children are chosen for 3 things: greatness, excellence, and achievement. What are those 3 things, everybody? Greatness, excellence, and achievement. And while I believe they're chosen for greatness, excellence, and achievement, unfortunately, there are forces and factors in society that have chosen them for something else. There are forces and factors in society that have chosen many of our children to populate the prison industrial complex. Ashe? There are forces and factors in society that create and manufacture images that show us images of gangsterized and criminalized young black and brown males. Ashe? There are forces and factors in our nation that create and manufacture images of our young black and brown females that depict them as objects of sexual pleasure rather than subjects worthy of dignity and respect. Ashe? And so, but I still believe and know that our children are chosen. Chosen for what? What do we say? Greatness, excellence, and achievement. And I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, the values were very clear. The values were very clear. And I don't know about the family that you grew up in, but I know my mama was big on 2 words: home training. Don't act like you ain't got no home training. It's all right. We call and response this evening, right? Don't act like you ain't got what? No home training. And what was interesting about the way that she would do that, I'm the last of 5 children, and we might be walking in the grocery store, and we might be pushing the cart with Mama, and then all of a sudden she would just stop, and she would look off in a certain direction, and she would say, mm-hmm, mm. And you know, anytime a black woman says, something trifling is happening in a 25-foot radius, right? And so we would look off in the direction that she was looking, and invariably there would be some children that were our age that looked like us who were acting like they had what? No home training. Now, by a show of hands, how many of you parents out there tend to raise your children the same way that you were raised? Let me just see a show of hands. A few of you, okay. How many of you find yourselves, even to your own dismay, how many of you find yourselves saying the same thing to your children that your parents said to you, right? So I've always said, me and my wife have 2 children. I've oftentimes said to them, don't act like you ain't got no home training. And what's interesting is the way things were set up in the house that I grew up in, most times, all my mother had to do was give you the look. Does anybody know the look? I mean, if you were doing the look right now, we wouldn't even need to turn up the lights. We would be able to feel the look, right? And if you got that look, you know you better get straight real quick, right? But in raising my sons, the look didn't always work. And I'll never forget one day, my son was, he was acting up. I gave him the look. He didn't respond right. And he realized I was about to snatch him up. He was like, no, Daddy, I got home training. I said, don't tell me you got home training. Show me you got home training. Because demonstration beats conversation. Ashe? One more time. Demonstration what? Beats conversation. Don't tell me you got home training. Show me. And so the values were very clear. The values were reinforced on a daily basis. The values were infused into everything that we did, into the chores that we did at home, into our homework. And I'm not suggesting that we were perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not suggesting that we didn't fall by the wayside or make mistakes at all. But there was a family safety net and there was a community safety net. Is this making sense? But what we find now is that when our children may fall by the wayside, when they make a mistake, a lot of times the family safety net is not there, Ashe, and the community safety net is not there, and they fall through the cracks of society, Ashe. And so what I want to introduce us to is what I call education for transformation. Education for transformation. And my definition of education for transformation is simply the process of recapturing and practicing the ancient African and African American tradition of educational excellence. You say, well, now, wait a minute, Dr. Akua. There are students and parents here that are not African American. That's okay. Guess what? Everybody can benefit from the blessing. Ashe? There are some things that will work with all, and that's the beauty of a multicultural education, is you get to see the beauty of all cultures. Ashe? But what has typically been left out is the African and African American contributions, which constitutes a culturally irrelevant curriculum, and we wonder why children want to drop out or mentally opt out. Ashe? Because if I'm coming to your classroom and it's not relevant to who I am, what I look like, where I come from, or where I want to go, then that's going to cause some serious cultural conflict in the classroom. Ashe? And so what I want to do is I want to share with you a diagram that I use oftentimes to help us to understand what we're dealing with. So what you see in this diagram is a circle and a dot. The circle represents the community. What does the circle represent, class? Community. And the dot represents you. What does the dot represent? And where is the dot in relationship to the circle? It's in the center. Everybody say centered. See, everybody, as long as we stay centered, we have access to everything that we could possibly want. And I'm gonna put some words up on the screen. And when you see these words on the screen, I want you to call out what you want for your family, your community, and your school. All right? So when you see it on the screen, just call out what you want for your family, school, and community. Just call it out right now. Security, safety, faith, love, joy. All right? So now, watch this. We have access to all of that and more as long as we stay what? Centered. Centered in what? Centered in the best of our culture. But most of our children have not been exposed to the best of our culture. They've been exposed to the worst of the culture. Look at that. We didn't even practice that, and y'all got it right. This must be the smart class. And so if they've been exposed to the worst of the culture, what happens is they begin to make false associations about what it means to be black. They begin to make false associations about what it means to be Hispanic. They begin to make false associations about their power, their potential, and their possibilities. Ashe? And so there are forces and factors in our society that act like this magnet. Watch very carefully, that begin to draw us from our center, which was our place of power. And look at what begins to emerge in the family, the community, and the school, because now we've been decentered. Call out what you see that begins to emerge when we become decentered. Academic failure, violence, poverty, violence, disrespect. All because we were centered, now we've been decentered. Ashe? So what that means then, if I've been decentered, then we must be what? Recentered. One more time. If we've been decentered, we must be what? Recentered. So when I come to school, when I come to your classroom, that should be a recentering process. Parents, when our children come home in the evening, we need to have something to recenter them if there was something that happened on the way from school that decentered them. Ashe? And when we send them in the morning, we need to have something that centers them before they go into the schoolhouse. Ashe? But here's the deep thing. It's one thing if I know that I have been decentered, because then I can do something about it. I can say, oh man, I forgot to read my scriptures this morning. Oh, I forgot to meditate or pray. I need to get back around the right people. That's if I know I've been decentered. But if I don't know that I've been decentered, they say you don't know and you don't even know that you don't know. So what happens then if the center is way over here, but I was born into a context way over here that's decentered? And look at what happens, everybody. What happens, how many of y'all know somebody who's never been exposed to the center, who's going in circles? Ashe? And so this is where partnerships between the community, the family, and other and faith-based organizations, this is where it becomes so very important. More than important, it's vital. Everybody say vital. What do we mean by vital? If you ever have occasion to go to the hospital, one of the first things that they're going to do is they're going to check your vital signs. The vital signs are what is keeping you alive. And if your vital signs are not properly activated, then your life is in jeopardy. Ashe? And I would like to suggest that the life of our schools and communities and families is in jeopardy today because we have been decentered. Principal Baruti Kafele, who's an award-winning principal who took his school, Newark Tech High School, from worst to first in the country, recognized by U.S. News and World Report magazine. He said, lacking cultural competence is equivalent to teaching a subject you know absolutely nothing about. Ashe? And so when we go in schools today, what we find is, and I find this to be terribly unfair. See, it's one thing if you prepare me for those that you're asking me to teach, but what we find is that a lot of teachers are sent into classrooms without the proper training in culturally relevant and responsive teaching. Ashe? And then for parents, for many of us as parents, when we come back to the school, for some of us, it's returning to the scene of the crime of our own miseducation. So we love and appreciate the fact that you all came out this evening. Give yourselves a round of applause. But how many of y'all know somebody else that should be here tonight? But for some parents, to return to the school is to return to the source of some of their trauma. Ashe? This is why the community partnerships are so very, very vital and important. Ashe? And so what happens oftentimes in our schools and in our homes is there's something that Dr. Joyce King calls disconsciousness. Everybody say disconsciousness. Disconsciousness is an uncritical habit of mind that accepts the status quo as given. Let me explain what that means. An uncritical habit of mind. So if a certain population of students has low scores, then some people say, who are disconscious, would say, oh, well, those students just don't do well. Disconsciousness, an uncritical habit of mind. If there's a certain level of a suspension rate amongst certain populations of students, well, you know, those students just get suspended more. Disconsciousness, an uncritical habit of mind that does not examine systems and structures that cause those things to happen. Is this making sense? Okay, and so there are three things that I want us to look at this evening, and the first one is that we have to change our mentality. Everybody say mentality. You know, several years ago, I was logging into my email account, and the news headline of the day came up. And the news headline of the day came up with this picture, and it said, identity theft is the fastest growing crime in America. Would you raise your hand if you or somebody you know has been a victim of identity theft? Let me just see a show of hands. Keep your hand up, look around the room. Quite a few people, maybe half the audience here. A lot of times when I ask this question, different places around the country, 70 to 90% of the audience will raise their hands. And I've been a victim of identity theft where someone stole my personal information, gained access to my accounts and different things like that. But what's interesting about that process is it takes a long time to clean it up. It can take months and sometimes years. Ashe? But you know, in the process of what happened when it happened to me, something very interesting. I had an instant awakening. I said that, and that instant awakening told me that many of our children are victims of cultural identity theft. See, regular identity theft is when someone steals your personal information, but cultural identity theft is when someone steals your story. How is it that you can take a group of people who gave the world reading and writing and language and literature and mathematics and medicine and science and technology, how do you take that group of people and then convince them that they come from a race of pimps, players, criminals, and thugs? Cultural identity theft. So now, young person comes to school, wants to act like a pimp, player, criminal, or thug because there is a cultural misorientation, because they have associated their culture with degenerate behavior. Is this making sense at all? And so what happens is one of my elders, Dr. Joyce King, she said, Chike, it's not just identity theft, it's identity replacement. And you can get paid big money in America to act out these images which have been placed in broad circulation all over not just the country, but all over the world. Ashe? And what happens is you get paid big money to act like that. The more outrageous you act, the more money you can make. Watch this, you act really outrageous, you'll get you a reality TV show deal. And what happens in the process is people begin to think now that this is what it means to be black. People begin to think now that this is what it means to be Latino. Is this making sense, everybody? And what this leads to is what Asa Hilliard and Wade Nobles have called conceptual incarceration, because so many people have problems thinking beyond that image. Thinking beyond that image, which requires us as parents to have to make some hard what? Decisions. Let me see if I can give you an example. There's a lesson that I taught my sons from a very, very young age. And it's a very, very simple lesson. If you go in the store and purchase something, make sure that you get a receipt. Now, this was not a financial lesson. This was not about tracking your expenses, although that's important as well. This was a social lesson. Somebody say, break that down. Break it down. So you say, well, why do you want your child to have a receipt? Well, one day, as it was, when my son was about 10 years old, I was stopping at the gas station. And I said, and I was getting out to pump the gas. And he said, Dad, can I go in and get a pack of gum? I said, yeah, go ahead. I said, but make sure you get a receipt. So he goes in, he gets his pack of gum, he comes out, he's chewing his gum. And I said, did you get a receipt? And he said, no. I said, didn't I just tell you to get a receipt? Don't I always tell you? He said, yeah, but Dad, it's just a pack of gum. Why are you tripping? It's not that deep. I said, no, it is that deep. Take your nail behind back in there and get a receipt. Didn't I tell you? Did anybody else come up under the didn't I tell you parents? Okay, didn't I tell you, right? So now, this was not a financial lesson. This was a social lesson. When he came back with the receipt, so let me see the receipt. He showed me the receipt. He said, why did I have to get a receipt? I said, because, now y'all tell me why he had to get a receipt. Huh? Because I said, young men who look like you are stereotyped and believed immediately, it's believed that you're going to steal something. So I ask questions to young people. I'll ask it tonight, and even adults. How many of you all have ever been followed in the store? Let me see a show of hands. Keep your hands up. Look around the room. You see? Hands down. Now, this is a lesson I would teach in my class as a public school teacher. But there's a certain measure of cultural competency that I would have to teach that lesson. But if I'm unaware of that cultural experience, I can't teach what I don't know. Is this making sense? Yes. So there's a certain level of cultural sensitivity, consciousness, and competence that is required, and that requires additional training, that requires additional support, that requires additional professional development. Ashe? But don't wait for it to be taught at school. You need to be teaching it at home. Ashe? Well, when are you going to have the conversation with your children about what I call the 3 Ps? The police, the penitentiaries, and the predators. Ashe? The police, the penitentiary, and the predators. Ashe? You got to know, when my sons were very, very young, for some strange reason, it was very important to them to be able to, if we were out at a restaurant and we were going someplace to eat and they had to use the restroom, it became important the older that they got from a young age to be able to go to the restroom what? By themselves. And so it got to that point around the age of 6 or 7, and my son asked if he could go to the restroom. I said, well, I'll walk you to the restroom. He said, no, Daddy, I'm a big boy now. I can go by. I said, I know you're a big boy, but there's some people out here who I don't quite trust, right? And then it had to get to the point where I had to let him go, and he didn't know, but I was actually following him and watching him. Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about, okay? And so I taught my sons, does anybody know offhand the 2 hardest parts of the human body? 2 hardest parts of the human body. That's a good guess, the skull, but actually it's the elbow and the knees. So I had to teach my sons how to use their elbows and knees in case someone, put their hands on them. Ashe? But these are, because that's the predators part. Because there are people out here who are preying upon our children, and I don't mean P-R-A-Y. And all it takes is one instance like that, an instance of that trauma that can send a child spiraling out of control, and it can take a lifetime to recover from. Is this making sense? And so there are decisions that we have to make along the way. But these things that happen when our children come to schools and in the classrooms where they're not learning the truth about who they are and where they come from, this is deeply problematic. And in 1933, Dr. Carter G. Woodson identified that and called it miseducation. Everybody say miseducation. Miseducation is simply a process of omitting truthful cultural knowledge and not preparing students for life as they will face it. So there's something to be said about life as you will face it as a young African American, as a young Hispanic person. There are certain life experiences that must be spoken to and put in cultural and social context. Ashe? That needs to happen at home. That also needs to happen at school, but it's got to happen first where? At home. A few years ago when there was this rash of highly publicized national murders of African Americans, y'all remember, right? Y'all remember because it's still going on, but it was a rash like right after one after the other of these different shootings and everything. And one that took place that, and I don't know if you went through this as a parent, like what to tell your children. How do we explain this, right? Oh my God, it's happened again. And it just so happened when one of these situations occurred, I was on the road doing what I'm doing now because I'm based in Atlanta. I'm not from here. And so what my wife called and told me, this was after the strangling of Eric Garner by the New York City police. Y'all remember that? And no disrespect to police. We appreciate those that do their job. Ashe? We appreciate those who serve and protect. But in this particular case, that's not what was happening. And my wife called me. My oldest son at that time was 15 years old. And she said, Jabari, when he saw the video of that strangling on the news, he broke down and started crying. He was 15 years old. So when I got back, we sat down and we talked about it. And I said, why was that so impactful for you? He said, Dad, you know I have asthma, right? I said, of course I know. And then he said, you know all those times you drove me to the emergency room when I was having an attack and I literally thought I was going to die? I said, yeah, of course. And he said, you remember how you prayed with me and all those things? I said, of course. He said, when I saw that video of Eric Garner being choked by the New York police, I couldn't imagine somebody intentionally making somebody not breathe. But these are conversations we got to have at home, Ashe? Not to make our children paranoid, but to be forewarned is to be forearmed, Ashe? And so there is a certain way that we should carry ourselves in the presence of authority, Ashe? And so these are conversations that we must have. But, and Wally Mubarudi says, miseducation leads to diseducation. What is diseducation? A process which leads the student to despise the very idea of learning. Anybody ever seen this look on a child's face before? Just completely checked out. They went from miseducation to diseducation. Ashe? And this is why we teach that education is identity restoration. Education is identity restoration. As a matter of fact, there's an African proverb that says, if the wise village elders don't teach the youth, the village idiots most certainly will. I say, how many of y'all know some of the village idiots? Right? How many of y'all know more than one? Put up another hand. I see somebody in the back shaking a leg too. We know a lot of, and they're busy. They're working 24/7, right? If the wise village elders don't teach the youth, the village idiots most certainly will. So we've got to come together. We've got to form these community partnerships. We need to have strategic alliances and positive relationships with the school and the community. And you all are demonstrating that right now. Ashe? Dr. Asa Hilliard said, the only thing standing between us and excellence is our beliefs. Now, would you raise your hand right now if you've learned something just in these first few minutes of what I've been sharing? If you're learning something, raise your hand right now. Keep your hand up. Look around the room. All right, you can put your hand down. What I do is I send out parent power tips, and I send out teacher transformation tips. And if you would like that, take a shot of this. You can do it later, but you can text Dr. Akua to 22828. Text Dr. Akua to 22828. Just take a picture of it now, and you can do it later. But what that does is it puts you in our database. I promise I won't spam you, but from time to time, I will send you parent power tips in the form of a short paragraph or a short video clip. Ashe? All right, now, so the first thing that we said we had to work on was our mentality. Everybody say mentality. The second thing that we have to work on is our methods. Everybody say methods. And the interesting thing about our methods is one of the things that we must do is read with our children. This method, this is something that we can all do. Ashe? And even, now, I want to be sensitive to the fact that all of us may or may not have had the same access to education. Ashe? Even in cases where you don't consider yourself as a parent a good reader. There are resources online that can read things to your child, but you have to set aside that sacred space to make that happen. Ashe? And here's what the research shows. It shows that if you will read with your child, it increases fluency, their ability to read words without stuttering or stumbling over them. It increases comprehension. It also increases vocabulary development and their understanding of what words mean what and how they're used in a sentence. Now, what are we talking about? We talking about 2 hours a night, 3 hours a night? We're not even talking about 1 hour a night. How about this? 15 minutes. 15 minutes a day can dramatically increase your child's reading comprehension and fluency. Ashe? Something as simple as that. But the other thing is the quality time. Notice I have a picture here of a parent reading with a young child, but I also have a picture of a parent reading with an older child who's in high school. Ashe? Because it doesn't stop. One of the things is we think the older a child gets, the more independent they can become because now they can feed and clothe themselves. That's when they need the most attention. Ashe? Because that's when the weapons of mass deception and the weapons of mass distraction increase the older our children get and the more access they have to technology. Ashe? So don't think just because your child's in high school that they don't still need that personal time with you. They need it then more than ever. And that's a good time to just ask them questions, not only about what you're reading, but about current events, what they think about certain things. Paint scenarios for them. What would you do if you and your friends were at the store and this happened? Or what would you do if you were out at a game and this happened? And walk through certain scenarios with them to check their critical thinking skills. Ashe? And so as we go a little further here, what we also see, if you haven't done so already, you need to meet your child's teacher. Now, why do we say that? You want to meet your child's teacher as soon as possible at the beginning of the school year. Ashe? Now, I'm going to tell you something that's going to sound very, very unfair, but it's the 100% truth. I'm telling you this as an educator. If I meet the parent of my students, I naturally treat that child differently. I'm going to say that again. If I meet the parent of one of my students, I love all my students, but if I meet the parent, I naturally treat that student differently. Why is that? The reason that I treat the child differently because now I can talk to that child in a way that I can't talk to the other children. Because if that child gets out of line, if that child doesn't do well on a quiz or a test or something like that, I said, I just spoke with your mama. And she gave me her cell number and told me to call her. I just met your daddy. And he told me to call. That's a different level of relationship, Ashe. So you want to get to know your child's teachers and administrators. You also want to get to know your child's friends. Can I tell you that you should get to know your child's friends? Because you need to know who's influencing your children. And I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I would ask my mom, Mama, can I go over to Dante's house? And she'd say, no. I say, why not? Listen to her response. Because I don't know Dante's. Oh, y'all must know my mama. She said, I don't know what's going on in that house. So she knew my friends. She knew what was acceptable and what was unacceptable. And if she saw somebody I was hanging around that was unacceptable, she would let us know in a heartbeat. And here's what she said. I don't know what's wrong with that boy. You need to stop hanging with him. Ashe? But it's things like that that made all the difference. And that got me to where I am today. And so what we find is that when you go to meet your child's teacher, you got to establish a relationship and a rapport. That teacher needs to know that you're in it to win it and that you're going to support academics at home. And here's the other thing. Can I let y'all in on a secret? This is going to be an absolute game changer. I promise you. If you have a problem with your child's teacher, of course that would never happen. But if you had a disagreement with the teacher, you had a problem with your child's teacher, can you do me a favor and please do not let your child know that? Say so, please. Can I say a little bit more about that? If you let your child know, and here's why, because I've heard children say this to teachers before. Teachers say, I'm going to call your mother. Good, she don't like you, no way. If you let your child know that you don't like one of their teachers, you finna get played. Your child is going to play you against your teacher and your teacher against you, and all the while, your child's academics is going to suffer. So we do know conflicts arise. But if you have a problem with your child's teacher, go to that teacher. And if you can't get it resolved with the teacher, go up the line, check with the assistant principal and the principal. But do not let your child know that, because if they sense that you don't like that teacher, they will stop performing in that class and even get disrespectful with that teacher. Ashe? I hope y'all are getting this now, okay? And so I want to, as I begin to wind down here, I got a couple other things I want to share with you. When we talk about student achievement, one of the things that has not been taken into account often enough is students' cognitive styles. Cognitive is thinking, their thinking styles. Back in the 80s, Dr. Janice Hale talked about this in her book, Black Children, Their Roots and Their Culture. And then more recently, Zaretta Hammond has come out with a book called Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. And what they discovered through scientific research is something very interesting about what happens in the brain of a child. In particular, the brain of children of color. And they were able to narrow it down to black children and children of color. So let's look at this. We know, and this is across the board, we know that the left brain is the analytical or the procedural side of the brain. So let's look at what are the things that the left brain does. Let's read these together. 1, 2, 3, read. Logic. Can't hear you. Business, writing, language, science, linear thinking, right? Okay, that's left brain. The right brain is the relational and the conceptual side of the brain. Let's read what those functions are. 1, 2, 3, read. Art, music, imagination, intuition, Okay, excuse my misspelling of music there. Okay, so these are the two parts of the brain. You've got the analytical and you've got the relational, the left and the right. Scientific research has shown that most children of color reach the analytical by way of the relational. How does this relate to me? If you don't tell me how this relates to me, I don't want to learn it. It's not that I can't learn it. It's not that I can't be analytical, but I reach the analytical by way of the relational. Is this making sense? Yes. But here's the thing. Most classrooms, most schools, and most curricula are set up based on left brain processes. So when a child of color enters into that classroom, they're already at a disadvantage because the teacher may not know the culturally relevant and responsive teaching methods that are needed to reach that child. Ashe? So I have a question. I have a question for all educators and parents, because parents, you should know something about your child's learning style. Ashe? And this may have been, if you had academic challenges, which I did, this may have been what led you into some academic challenges. So I'm asking the question, do I have to lose my right mind to be successful in your class? You see, when I was in high school, I had a 1.9 GPA. Now, thank you so much, Ms. Gallen-Clark. You were the only one who was shocked by that. Everybody else is looking around like, yeah, you look pretty dumb to me. Let me try that again. At one time, I had a 1.9 GPA. Y'all need to work on that. That was real weak. But I went through a dramatic transformation and was able to increase a 1.9 to a 3.9 ultimately. Ashe? Give me a round of applause, please. Now, all during that time that I had a 1.9 GPA, outside of school, I'm writing poetry. I'm writing short stories. Ashe? I taught myself how to play the piano and the keyboards, and I'm writing music. Okay? Interesting thing, though I was struggling in all my classes, the one class that I did enjoy was writing, and I had an expository writing class. And something interesting happened in that class. I routinely got A's on my weekly paper. And sometimes I would get a 100. No grammatical or usage errors, nothing. And after getting several 100s, I was always eager to get that paper back every week because that was the only class I was doing well in. Ashe? But one day, I came in on a Monday and I got my paper back, but it didn't have a grade on it. It just said, see me. Anybody else get a paper like that before? I know I ain't the only one. Come on now. Somebody else got one of them papers, right? And so I went up to the teacher and I said, sir, you wanted to see me? And he said, oh, yes, that's right. What does this word mean? So I told him what the word meant. He said, well, what does this word mean? I told him what the word meant. He said, well, what does this word mean? I told him what the word meant, the dictionary definition and the context of how I had used it in the paper. He went through 5 or 6 words, but he still was not convinced. And I'm convinced that the reason he wasn't convinced is because a child that looked like me was not supposed to be able to write like that. There was something about the way that he was raised and trained. There were certain tacit assumptions that he had made about children who looked like me not being able to write like that. What he did not know is that I would write and publish my first book by the age of 25. What he didn't know was that I would write and publish 8 books by the age of 35. What he didn't know is I would go on to become a language arts teacher like him, a teacher of the year, and a teacher of teachers, traveling nationally and internationally, putting on my own conference called the Teacher Transformation Institute, where people fly to Atlanta to see me. He didn't know that I would be selected as one of Ebony Magazine's 50 Leaders of Tomorrow. He didn't know that I would be on radio and television. I don't share this with you to impress you, but to impress upon you that you must learn to see our children with a different set of eyes. You must learn to see and if you think this is a color thing, you got it all wrong. I'm not talking about color. I'm talking about culture and consciousness about culture. Is this making sense? Because you could have a teacher or an administrator who's the same culture as a child who is still not looking at them with the right eyes. Is this making sense? When we talk about culturally relevant and responsive teaching, I need for you to do some homework. I'm a teacher. I give homework. Ashe? If you haven't seen this before, raise your hand if you've seen Precious Knowledge. Oh, good. I see a couple of people have seen it. This is an amazing documentary. You got to look it up. Look it up on YouTube. You can see some clips about it. This is a story, because I want you to be clear, this ain't just a black thing. It is a black thing, but it's not just a black thing. In this particular documentary, it features Curtis Acosta and Jose Gonzalez and a number of other educators. And the issue is that in the Tucson Unified School District, they were dealing with a serious problem. In the state of Arizona, there was a 50% dropout rate among Latino high school students. What was the dropout rate? 50%, okay? And so what they decided to do was they decided to institute a Raza Studies or Mexican American Studies program, okay? Because in that area, they had a large percentage of Mexican American students. And this ethnic studies program would elevate and celebrate their history and culture. It would teach them who they were, where they came from, in relation to every subject that they taught in school. Ashe? Now, we hear people say that they're data-driven and research-driven. I always like to ask the question, because I teach master's and doctoral students. I always say, who's data and who's research? Ashe? But this is their research, and as a result of that program, look at this. The results. The Raza Studies students outperformed all other students in the district with a 93% graduation rate. When you teach children based on them being centered in the best of their culture, the academics and the achievement gets off the chart. Ashe? So we have to, in order to do that, we have to learn to see with a different set of eyes. So before we leave here today, everyone, now you didn't know this, but before we leave here today, you have to take a test. We're going to take a test. But the good news is it's a very short test. It's only going to take 30 seconds. All right? In class, let's read the directions to this test together. 1, 2, 3, read. How many circles do you see? Now, I'm not talking about the circles in the O right here and right here. I'm going to put a picture, an image up here. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds of silence. And after that 30 seconds is up, then I will take your answers. But please don't tell anybody. Don't call out any answers in that 30 seconds. Ashe? Everybody understands the directions, yes? Yes. How many circles do you see? Ready, set, go. $20 seconds. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. Any guesses here? How many circles do you see? Yes. You saw 0. Anybody else? Yes. You saw 8. Okay. Anybody else? Yes. 16. Any other guesses? Yes. You saw 0. Okay. How many people didn't see any circles? Keep your hands up, because I got to see you. Look around the room. Okay. Well, I want to apologize because I did kind of play a trick on you. I asked you how many circles you saw, but when I put that image up there, you didn't see any circles. You saw what? But if you looked just outside of the squares, you might see a circle begin to emerge. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, now, I'm after 100% mastery. How many of you all who didn't see the circles, how many of you can see them now? Raise your hand if you can see the circles. Okay, so check this out. Now let's count out how many circles there are all together when you see it with the ring around it. Let's count them out together. Here we go. Ready, set, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Louder. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Who was that person who said 16? Ah, yes, there was there one? Yeah, give him a round of applause. Yes. Now, when you said that, they was wondering, what in the world is he looking at? But now they're clapping for you. That's okay. But wait a minute, everybody. Let's look at this, because those squares that you saw, that represents how many of us have been trained to see our children. But those circles represent the potential, the possibilities, the excellence, and the achievement. So I have several observations that I make about this little demonstration. The first one is, we were all looking at the same thing, but we didn't all see the same thing. Somebody looked at me when I was in high school and saw an underachieving student. They didn't see all those other accolades that I laid out to you before. Certainly didn't see me being a college professor. Ashe? This is why I'm telling you, we must learn to see with a different set of eyes, even when our children are not presenting the best version of themselves. And the only reason I'm standing before you right now is because somebody took the time to see something in me that I didn't see in myself. Ashe? And then thirdly, looking and seeing are two entirely different processes. And this is why our ancestors said, we have 3 eyes, 2 to look and 1 to see. Ashe? That's the third eye. And so we have to look with a different set of insight. So we talked about our mentality. Everybody say mentality. We talked about our methods. Everybody say methods. And lastly, we just need to look real quickly at materials. Because the materials that many of our children have, and this is, it starts at home, because you have to purchase the materials that are reflective of your children. Ashe? That look like your children look. That have the same type of hair that your children have. Ashe? That come from the same cultural background that you do. I want to do a quick demonstration for you. I did this with a group of teachers. And I asked them to name the classical scientists that they had learned about growing up. And they came up with this list, and I wrote it down on a whiteboard. Let's read who they said are the classic scientists. Let's read them together. Ready? Go. Besides being scientists, what do each of these scientists have in common, class? White and male, with the exception of one, Marie Curie. So now let's put a face with each of these wonderful scientists. And by the way, each of them were wonderful scientists. They did amazing things. But if I walk into your classroom or I walk into your home, and these are the kind of images that we associate with scientific excellence, that is immediately an immediate cultural disconnect. Ashe? Because what that tells me is, oh, science isn't for me, because I don't look like none of them. Ashe? So when I come into your home, when I come into your school or classroom, I need to see culturally diverse and culturally relevant and responsive images of people who look like your children. Is this making sense? So we need to know about Masaru Emoto. We need to know about Mae Jemison, Thomas Mensah, Ernest Just, and Katherine Johnson, and Imhotep, and Rick Kittles, and so many more. And if you see some names and faces up there that you don't recognize, then you got some homework to do. Ashe? Because the parents are the first teacher. Who are the models of intellectual authority in your classrooms and homes? Because the home is the first classroom, and the parents are the first teachers. Ashe? And I say that again, the home is the first classroom, and the parents are the first teachers. And so we developed a poster line to begin to reflect the beauty of the culture, just to get you started. And we have some of them back there if you're interested. And then the other thing is, whose knowledge is worth knowing? Why is it that we all had heard about these scientists, but maybe we had not been exposed to these? Whose knowledge is worth knowing? Who are the models of intellectual authority? Ashe? Whose values are we reinforcing? Is this making sense? Yes. And so we develop curriculum resources that help our children. Here's one called Reading Revolution. It is a book of 90 reading selections set up in a standardized testing format with a reading selection on the left, multiple choice questions on the right. But each of these reading selections are about African and African American historical personalities. Ashe? This is just an example of some of the different kinds of resources that we produce to help our children. Lastly, everyone, as I close, Dr. Asa Hilliard tells us about the achievement gap that nobody is talking about. Most people, when you hear them talk about the achievement gap, they're talking about the supposed gap between white student achievement and black student achievement. And he said we should not be comparing white student achievement and black student achievement. We should be comparing black student achievement to black excellence. Ashe? especially if white student achievement is mediocre itself. Ashe? So he said the achievement gap that no one is talking about is this, that when children from a low socioeconomic background have 3 good teachers in a row, how many good teachers in a row? 3. Good meaning culturally competent. What does good mean? Culturally competent. When children of a low socioeconomic status, children of color have 3 good teachers in a row, they outperform all other students. Regardless of their socioeconomic status, he said this is what the evaluation research shows. Ashe? And so what we have to do is we've got to share this information with our children. And this is what we're doing as we go around the country and we do Success Quest seminars like the one we did earlier today at Weaver High, here at Weaver High School. And so as I leave you, the paradigm for high performance begins with changing our mentality, changing our methods, and changing our materials. And with that, brothers and sisters, I just want to leave you with the fact that the parent and the teacher is the curriculum. The knowledge and the information that you share with your children at home makes all the difference in the world. And we teach our children that America has both tremendous opportunity, but it also has profound, deeply structured inequality. And our job as conscious and committed parents and students and teachers is to equip our students to take advantage of the opportunities and to challenge and transform the inequities. And when we do that, we'll understand. We will understand why Fannie Lou Hamer said, never forget where you came from and always praise the bridges that carried you over. We'll also understand why James Baldwin said, our crowns have been bought and paid for. All we have to do is put them on our heads. Thank you, and God bless you.
One, two. All right, family, we want to, once again, let's thank Dr. Akua, first of all. My goodness. My goodness. And, you know, I think we would be remiss if we didn't allow you to ask some questions. Is that right? Yes. I can see it on your face. You guys, you're like, I want to ask him about that right there. So we want to do a Q&A, if that's all right. And so I'm going to turn the mic back over to Doc, and I'm going to go out into the audience, and let's see some hands. Who has the first question?
First question. Oh, here's a question right over here.
My sister, please stand.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm home taking care of my great-grandson and my grandson, and they're 3 and 9 months old. And they love to watch the YouTube ABC. But most of the ABC is all white and one black little boy. And that sort of bothers me a little bit, so I'm just trying to figure out. They love watching it, and I see my 9-month-old now, he's starting to sing it, the ABCs, but I'm trying to see what is alternative thing that I could give him, because it does, you know, bother me a little bit to see if they love that.
So a lot of times, very important that our children see images, positive images of themselves. Very, very important. And even as the child gets older, I always say if we don't show them the positive images at home and in here, as soon as they leave here or as soon as they get on their mobile device, they're going to see all kinds of negative and degenerate images. So it's very important that we show them the positive ones. There are a number of great books that deal with that. One of them is called Afrobits, A-F-R-O, Afrobits, as opposed to alphabets, but you can look that up. But here's the other thing. I went through a period in my life where I was constantly critiquing curricula, textbooks, and different things like that. And it is important to have a critical lens when we look at these things. But I wanted to move from just critiquing those types of things. I wanted to move from protest to production. What do I mean by that? It's one thing to point out what's wrong, but why don't we come together to produce what's right? And why would we expect those that have a vested interest in producing what is wrong, what is not for us? Why would we expect them to produce something for us? So it's very important. That's why I started writing and publishing books and creating an entire poster line and different things of that nature. So we have to move from protest to production, but for the purposes of your grandchildren, I would say check out Afrobits, and there are a number of other. When you do a Google search on that, a number of other books like that will come up. But those images are so very, very important for them to see, the diverse images. And I'm going to go back for just a second. I skipped over this for the sake of time, but since you raised it up, I will lift it up. A study was done back in 2015 on children's books. And what it demonstrated was they did a review of thousands of children's books that year. And what they determined was that the characters in those books, 73% of them were white. Now, here's an interesting data point for you to consider. In America, for the first time in American history, children of color are the majority of public school students. Let me say that again. For the first time in the history of the United States of America, children of color are the majority of public school students. Children of color, African American, Hispanic students, Asian and Pacific Islander, Native Americans. 50.1% of the public school population when they came out with this data in 2015. It's only going to increase, Ashe? Ashe. And there's some people outside these doors that aren't too fond of that fact, Ashe? And so we have to be mindful of that, and our curricula should reflect that. So 73% was white. Then you had 12.5 was animals and trucks. There was more, now we know in children's books they have animals and stuff like that, but there was more representation of animals than there was of black and Hispanic students. Ashe? This is a production issue. This is why I produce materials, because I'm not going to wait around for somebody else to do that for me. Ashe? But then it becomes incumbent upon the schools and school systems that are serious to then begin to seek those types of materials for our children. Ashe? So thank you so much for that question. Okay, yes?
Not a question, but it's an observation. As an elementary school teacher, all of my godchildren and my friends, Christmas, birthday, I always give, they go, I know, it's a book. And I go, yeah, it's a book.
That's
and
right.
I want you to read it, and I want you to tell me about it. But every single one of those adults now in their 40s give their children books.
Yes.
So it is a change of mindset.
Yes, absolutely. And we have to continue to reinforce that so they know what to expect and that you're going to hold them accountable for
and
that.
I'm sorry. I meant to say there were books of them. So
Books.
when they looked at the cover, they knew it was about them.
Absolutely.
And it was culturally competent for them.
Mhm.
That was the important thing.
I had a parent who, at the time I was teaching 8th grade and I had left the school building. This was before school started. It was before the school year started, but it was like a couple of days before the first day of school. And it was around 4 or 5 p.m. I had left the building. A parent went on the 8th grade hall and walked, I guess they left the doors open, walked through each of the 8th grade classrooms, and then after leaving my classroom, made a beeline to the principal's office and said, Mr. Klein, who is in room 215? And the principal said, that's Mr. Akua. That's his classroom. Is everything okay? She said, I want my child in that classroom. He said, why is that? She said, because I went and I walked through his classroom, and everything that was on the walls represents who and what I want my child to be. So even though I wasn't there, there was something about the energy, there was something about the images that let her know that that was where her child needed to be. Ashe? So those types of things make a huge, huge difference at home and at school. Okay? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Dr. Ajua. As we talk about the historical, my question is there a historical context to our teachers leaving school, and what is it going to take to kind of get our people of color back in our schools in terms of teaching, et cetera?
Wow, I'm so glad that you asked that question. Is there a historical context to, I think what you're saying is black teachers leaving the profession? And the answer is absolutely. With the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision, the NEA, the National Education Association, shows us through their data that what was supposed to be integration led to the disintegration of many of our finest schools. And what happened was over 39,000 black teachers and leaders were demoted, displaced, or out and out fired. 39,000. Now this is back up through from the 1954 up through the early 70s. And those teachers were never replaced. And this is why over 70%, and some studies show it's over 80%, of urban school teachers are white and female. Now please hear me well. I'm not saying that a white teacher cannot teach a black child, so please don't misunderstand what I'm saying, or can't teach a child of color. But what I am saying that there does have to be cultural competency training involved in that. As a matter of fact, as I said before, it's not a matter of color, it's a matter of consciousness about culture. So for example, Dr. Samuel Proctor in a book called The Substance of Things Hoped For tells the story of a young teacher and student. The teacher's name is Miss Johnson, and let's say that the student's name is Keisha. I don't remember their exact names, but the story still fits. And Keisha walks up to Mrs. Johnson one day, and she said, "Mrs. Johnson, are you black?" And Mrs. Johnson says, "Well, no, sweetheart, why would you ask me that?" She said, "Because you got soul." You see, prior to being in Miss Johnson's class, she associated having soul with being black. But when she walked into a classroom where her culture was elevated and celebrated, where she could look on the walls and see positive representations of herself, she began to associate soul not based on color, but about consciousness, about culture. Ashe? Very, very important. So thank you for that question. And what we have to do to change that reality for the thousands of teachers of color that were displaced, I believe there needs to be state and national policies, federally funded policies to steer people in that direction. And they have policies for everything else that they want to steer people to, so that's not something that's out of the question, okay? Yes. Got to speak up, use your outside voice. Oh, wow. Good question. She said if you were educated the wrong way or miseducated, can you change a person's mind? And the answer is absolutely. And there are many people who have gone through that process. I mentioned it, myself having gone through that, who was miseducated. I think one of our quintessential examples of that, and it's such a rich example because you can see the exact stages that he went through, would be Malcolm X. And I love, I used to read from the autobiography of Malcolm X to my 7th graders, and we would do a whole unit on that. From Malcolm Little to Detroit Red, the Hustler, to Minister Malcolm X, to El-Hajj Malik Shabazz. And what that showed us is the power of a person to transform themselves with knowledge of self. So the short answer to your question is yes. Let's give her a round of applause for asking that question. That is wonderful. Yes, I think somebody, yes. Private school versus public school? Well, as a person who went to some private schools, I can tell you that you can get just as good a miseducation at a private school as you can at a public school. How about that? And you pay for it. You pay more out of pocket for that. And so that's deeply problematic. So you could go to a highly touted, highly regarded private school and still come out and know nothing about yourself. That is why, and watch this, you can go from pre-K to postdoctorate and learn nothing about who you are and where you come from. So it's not about how many degrees you have. It's not about the prestige of the school. It is about what is being taught there and who's doing the teaching and leading. Okay? Yes. Anybody else?
We have some closing announcements, and we really just want to thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause. You were a fantastic audience. We do have this videotaped, and so you may see it and have access to it. But this is not just a one and done. There's more work to be done. All right? This is just a call to action. All right? And so we have representatives from various schools here. We have representatives from different programs and so forth. And we are pooling our resources together. All right? And so BHCA will continue to be on the forefront of organizing and bringing our community together under this format of community education, which simply means education that is outside of the building. Is that right? Ashe? All right, yeah, they'll get me started. All right. Please help me to bring on Sister Renisha with our final announcements. Thank you for your time and effort.
Did you guys enjoy this evening's presentation? I did too. And would you like more presentations and discussions just like we had tonight? Okay, good. So that means you have to stay tuned for some announcements that will be coming out via the Blue Hills Civic Association and your emails regarding the next part of our series in January, okay? Have your calendars free in January. I would like to let you guys know that Dr. Akua has materials on sale. In the back, he will be at the table. You can see him. There are posters. All posters are $10 each, and each book will be $20. So you can see him right now at the back. We have some upcoming events at the Blue Hills Civic Association. We will be putting together a college and career fair on Tuesday, November 19th. Both events will be happening at the Keeney Pond House. And on Wednesday, November 20th, the Youth Civic Engagement Symposium. Please grab flyers and our newsletter on your way out to get more details and information about that event, and you'll be able to find the contact person on the sheet as well. We have a program evaluation that is emailed to you guys. Thank you so much for signing in. We have your email, and the evaluation will be sent via email. Please complete that at your earliest convenience.